to put your what library you're from and your location. We'd love to kind of get an idea of who all's in the room today.
Thanks, everyone.
And Lisa, if it looks like folks have stopped trickling in, we can go ahead and get started.
So I've got a little spiel to say, Sarah, before.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, great.
And then I'll pass it over to you in a minute.
Thank you so much.
This is why you're bad.
Hey, everyone, if you're not a presenter, you can mute yourself. We're getting some
Spread the
background
joy
noise,
and also
or I might mute
and
you.
also bring back because
Okay, there we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. So on behalf of Library Makers, I want to welcome you to our discussion on equity and library makerspaces. My name's Lisa Regala. I'm one of the members of the leadership team on Library Makers. And if you're new to Library Makers, we're a community that connects and supports library staff from all over the country in libraries that are big and small, and wherever you are in your maker journey. So whether you're just getting started or you've been making for many years, we welcome all of you to this community to share your experiences. Our site has its own social platform, librarymakers.org, where you can get to know one another and ask questions. And we have a blog and a video library of other past events too. So if you are enjoying what you hear today, you can always check out one of the past events as well. And before we get started, I want to launch a quick poll. This is a new thing we're trying, so if it is a little glitchy, I apologize. You're going to be our first ones we're doing it with. So we want to launch a quick poll so we can get to know our audience today a bit better. So let's give this a go. So if you can take a couple minutes and just answer our 3 questions on our poll, letting us know what region you are from, the type of library, and which kind of best describes the community that your library serves. I'll give you a few more seconds. Looks like most people have filled out the poll. All right, thank you, everyone. Let's see if we can. Yes, Rachel, we know it is a fancy poll, isn't it? That's thanks to Maya, one of our library makers. She made that, which had the graphic, which was fun. Can everyone see the results of the poll? Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of you are from the Midwest, so welcome Midwesterners here, 67% of you. And we have some global attendees too, so welcome as well. And then looks like most of you are from public libraries, but we do have some academic libraries represented here as well. So it's great to have you. And then finally, a pretty nice mix of rural, urban, and suburban communities that are being served. So thank you so much for giving us the info. It really helps us to understand who's attending. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kara House and Sarah Nagel, who are going to be leading our discussion today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lisa. That was really interesting to see who's all represented here today. So cool poll technology. I'm interested to figure out how you did that. I assume it's in Zoom somehow, but that's awesome. So yeah, I'm Sarah Nagel. I work at the Miami University Libraries, and I started a makerspace here in Ohio, Miami, Ohio, not in Florida. And I started a makerspace here in 2019, and I run that space still. And when it comes to equity and inclusion, that's been something that we've been thinking about and working towards since we opened the space. And so I'm really excited to listen to everyone's thoughts and the way that you have just thought about equity in your space. So excited to have this chat today. And I'll turn it over to Kara for her to introduce herself, and then we'll get into some discussion questions.
I'm Kara House. I'm with Greene County Public Library in Ohio. I built and now run the Makerspace here in our public library. We opened about 7.5 years ago, and we just this week opened in our brand new space through a remodel that we've done here in the building. So that's been a very interesting process. I'm very interested in this discussion because as part of my renovation, we were able to lower the heights on all of our things and make everything a little more accessible. And I'm interested to see, that kind of, accessibility and inclusion, what everybody else is doing and how I can better incorporate that now that I have more space. Sarah and I are both co-chairs for the Nation of Makers Library Working Group. And there is a Slack channel and a Facebook group for that as well. So if you haven't checked us out there, please do check that out or reach out to Sarah or I to join further discussions with that group as well. So do you want to start with the question, Sarah?
Sure, I'll start the discussion today, and feel free to just unmute yourself. And I believe attendees should have access to do that. Lisa, is that correct? So yes, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk. If you're more comfortable, you can raise your hand first and we can call on you, or you can also put answers into the chat, whatever you're more comfortable with. And we have a few discussion questions. We can go off on tangents, whatever direction kind of the conversation takes us. So we have a really broad open question just to start with, which is, how do you think about equity in your space?
Oh, and
And
Sarah,
I'll leave
before
it
we
open
dive
to
in,
the
do
group.
you want to mention a little bit about the grant this is part of? And
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Ugh, I've had the worst brain fog, and I think it's from COVID. So I'm gonna blame COVID for this, amongst many other things. Okay, so yeah, how this discussion came about, I was supposed to start with that. So this is something that Lisa originally had a conversation with Adam Maltese from Indiana University, who runs a makerspace there, and I believe the School of Education. And he's a PI on an NSF grant related to equity in makerspaces. And so part of that discussion was they're looking for folks from really all over the place, it seems, to have various types of kind of assessments / discussions related to equity in makerspaces. And they came up with this idea of a menu, which I thought was really cool. So they had like you can have a drink, you can have an appetizer or a meal, which is like a more intensive type of assessment tool. So we're doing a drink today, which is a kind of an open discussion on equity. So this session is being recorded today. So very important to let you all know that. And it is being used as part of their research project. However, it's important to let you all know that it is not going to be part of any kind of formally published findings. So nothing that you share today will be published or shared publicly. So just wanted to let you all know that, but it will go into the development of this grant and what directions it goes in. So I think that's the stage they're at right now. If I understand correctly, Lisa, they're trying to determine what directions need further research. So it's very preliminary at this stage. So not only are we interested in this for our own kind of selfish purposes of wanting to make our own spaces more equitable, but it's part of this study that I think could take a lot of shapes in the future, and it could include more maker spaces and more of us as it progresses. So Lisa, if there's anything else you wanted to add about that. Okay, and it looks like Rachel S., you have your hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself.
So my journey with equity and inclusion is a very personal journey where in 2009, my father lost his leg from the knee down. And it made me realize how the world is not really made for people who do not have, that are missing limbs. And so I started thinking more about how places are and how we can make them more ADA friendly and not just ADA compliant. It's actually something that I lecture on. I've given some lectures in New York State about it to librarians there. And so it's something that I think of when I think of table heights. And when I think of like doors, are they heavy? Can you pull them open? Because that was something that when my father moved from a wheelchair to a walker to a cane, you know, could he pull open a door or could he not pull open a door? Because, you know, maker spaces can get loud. So sometimes we close the doors when we're running certain equipment, and can you pull that door open or not? And then another thing that we only recently started thinking of in our makerspace was our presentations, because one of the people who ran our makerspace had colored vision deficiency. And for those of you who don't know, that's what was formerly called color blindness. And so it was really interesting for us to see that what we thought was this great presentation, they thought, oh, I actually can't see that color contrast, or I have no idea what you're trying to show there. So looking at those contrast colors and making sure that your presentation isn't overly busy with graphics for those who are neurodivergent, and making sure that you have spaces where if you're doing a program like this is my 3D printing class to teach you how to use a 3D printer, that you have spaces up front for people who have wheelchairs so they don't feel like they have to sit in the back, that you have comfortable seating for people who have rheumatoid arthritis, that you have a way to protect people who have light issues that get migraines. I mean, there are so many things to think about. I could go on and on and on, but there are a lot of people here that I think probably have some great ideas too, and I'd love to hear what they have to say too.
Trying to leave the floor open a little bit for people to have time to contribute. I will also say that we worked with so I'm at a university, so I have like kind of different resources, I guess, to work with, because we have various offices on campus that work with accessibility specifically, but we have a student advisory council for accessibility, and it's students with disabilities of various kinds that choose to join that council, and we toured them through the library and also the makerspace, and we got a lot of feedback from them. And one of the biggest ones was sensory issues in the makerspace, because it's very loud. And when we have events, they're very loud. So one of the ways we're dealing with that is we did purchase some noise canceling headsets. And we also are working on a quiet making space within our space. And it would either be an open office, like an available office that we hopefully will have, or just a kind of space that's separated slightly by dividers, and they can kind of be separate but do the same activities. So, but I will try to leave it open.
I was wondering about, talking about equity here in materials. So my name is Gabriela Sanchez. I'm a student here at UW-Madison. I'm wrapping up my master's. I'm currently working on writing my thesis, and my work is on makerspaces, and specifically distinguishing capital M makerspaces and lowercase m makerspaces as a means of kind of identifying this this gap in equity that has occurred and legitimacy in what I'm kind of suggesting or stating are kind of these gentrified white capital M makerspaces that offer their participants legitimacy and college credit versus lowercase m makerspaces, which offer the same kind of experience and learning opportunity for students without the legitimacy. Some of the distinctions between these spaces are the materials, right? And some of the distinctions are lo-fi or low fidelity and high fidelity kind of maker materials. So one of the biggest points that I put are like capital M makerspaces usually include one of like the long traditions of like 3D printers, right? And we know 3D printers to be kind of like a behemoth, in my opinion, but also like kind of iconic to like makerspaces. The thing is that they create this need and for independence for makerspaces that host them to then have staff that are experts in operating them and teaching participating users or makers how to operate them, as well as the onus of like the library to keep materials on deck, including like filament, to continue using them, which is not only expensive but also extremely wasteful. That being said, right, on the other end, lowercase m makerspaces don't, right? The difference is that ostensibly a student can walk in to, or a child can walk into a capital M makerspace with no prior knowledge of how to render a 3D model, right? And in a capital M makerspace, open up Tinkercad, let's say, and make a symmetrical 3D freestanding model within a matter of like hours, right? And given like a 6-hour print time on a 3D printer, that thing will come out fresh, symmetrical, ready to go, and it can stand on its own. But the same principles that you kind of get to skip over by automating through that 3D process can be taught and learned by handcrafting that with clay and understanding how to make things like an armature and understanding like points of balance and there's so many different micro steps that happen when you render something by hand. And I won't lie and say that the one that's handmade is prettier, but it certainly offers, I think, a richer experience for learning. And thinking about things like quiet making spaces as a consideration for students who struggle with the sensory issues of making in loud spaces. These days, I personally get very overwhelmed. Just there's a lot going on writing my thesis. And I find that fabric crafts have been my way of de-stressing. And a quiet making activity can be hosted and considered, right, as simply as like changing the material that we work with, right? So a quiet making space could be, let's do some felting, right? Let's work with felt. Let's work with soft things that don't make a lot of loud sounds. Let's touch soft materials. And I'm looking over at my maker table right now. Sorry, I keep looking over to my left side. And I think that these considerations that are, again, they're low cost, but high consideration, are worth thinking about and worth I think this is what we kind of have to do when we're thinking about equity, right? It's what specifically is it that our audience, our participants, are the user, right? The student, the child, the adult, the person who's coming into these maker spaces, the maker, what is it that they want and what is it that they need? And kind of going through our repertoire and kind of finding the diagnostic of like, well, if you want something quiet and we're having issues with sensory, like overstimulation, let's find the mix, the magical mix. And again, I'm not saying that this can solve everything, but I think more than anything, our pathway to equity is ultimately founded, or there's some foundational basis in empathy, in design, right? I think, forgive me, but I don't know the person's name. There was somebody else who spoke earlier about their personal experience with, considerations for accessibility being through a father's experience with losing part of their limb, right? Like, it's usually what that takes, is like a personal experience or secondhand experience with a personal, like with loss like that, to start to shift that perspective, to have to witness it and see and understand, like, that is what it takes, how the world is so different for those that are different. But yeah, comfortable seating. These considerations are usually an afterthought because people who are other are considered as an afterthought for, like, the quote unquote norm or the majority. And so when we center, I think, equity, right, or the considerations of equitable space and design, when we center the exception rather than the quote unquote rule or the majority with empathy in mind, then we actually open things up in rather interesting and innovative and really creative and playful ways, that invite others to also shift their perspective, and see things from that don't center their own experiences as the norm. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, Gabriella, I think that's an amazing way to think about things. And I think it kind of centers on starting with the user, right? Like we begin with the user community that we want to serve. And I teach a lot of design thinking, and it all hinges on that empathy aspect. So, you know what I mean? We start with empathy, we find out what our users need, and then we go from there. And we're not assuming what our users need. So I think that's amazing. I sent you a private message with my email address because I'd love to talk to you about your research. So please reach out to me. I'd love to have a Zoom meeting with you and talk about this, because I've thought about a lot of these things myself, because I don't think the actual machine matters as much as the action. I don't think that, you know what I mean? So I agree with you on a lot of these things. I am going to open up the floor to anybody else to answer that initial question of just how do you think about equity in your space? Yes, we have a hand up. It is Kat. Hi, Kat.
Hi, I actually, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. These
Yep.
are brand new and I just wanted to make sure they worked.
They better work. They're brand new.
Right. Going off of what Gabriella said, I'm sorry, I'm a digital services specialist here at the Barrington Area Library, Midwest, North Illinois. Thinking about what Gabrielle was talking about, I actually work with a lot of middle-aged, older women, and our spaces are traditionally very masculine. Men were more conditioned to be designers. Women were not very welcome or encouraged in this area. And it's become very apparent to me as I've worked with people who are very, and it can be all genders too, being timid of technology, but a lot of the women I work with, they're very intimidated by technology and intimidated by the idea of, like, trying any kind of design work. And meeting somebody where they're at technologically and breaking something down, making it more accessible, and allowing them to kind of explore something, making something feel a little bit more simpler, still achieving, like, the cool wow effect that we love about our spaces, but breaking it down in a way that's way more manageable for somebody who maybe feels extremely intimidated by the process, and then having them walk away and then come back because they feel good in the space, they feel confident, they're starting to feel that, like, like, yeah, I can do this. My friends saw what I made and they thought that was awesome. And now I feel good about myself. And getting to watch these women I've worked with kind of blossom and kind of take charge of like what they're doing in the space, I think is very important. And kind of one of my favorite things about what we do. And that's in addition to being able to have tables that can raise and lower and doors that we have two different doors. We have one door that is a push open and one is that's a pull open. So that way I had never thought about somebody's ability to open the door. And so that made me reflect on, oh, wow, this is actually a really great thing that not only do we have staff to help, but also this door can be opened in either direction too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone else sounded like someone else is going to talk. Okay. I wanted to say I shared an article that I think will be interesting to everyone, hopefully in the chat. It's from Maggie Mello, who runs the Equity in the Making Lab at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And it's about what makes people walk in the door for the first time, see a space, and then just walk out and never come back, and what makes people stay. And it's about those, it's the small things. It's the small like interactions. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, Kat. So anyone else want to answer that initial question of what equity looks like to you in your makerspace, or how do you think about equity in your space?
I love what Marnie said in the chat, that she tries to make sure that like their guides have pictures, words, and they're also videos. And I think that's important to remember. It's really easy to do, your use guides in the way that makes the most sense to you without really looking at how other people may make sense of information. And I think being able to offer those things in several different formats, whether it's video, pictures, and words, and then to even go a step further, she said that they also work in doing captions in other languages. I think that that's really awesome, to provide that kind of accessibility across, several different, ways that people can use that same information. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great information here in the chat. So I just want to make sure that we're not missing anything and kind of cover a few things that have gone on in chat. So I just, hold on, let me make sure I'm going all the way up. So Cindy Place said that equity points of emphasis for our libraries focuses on accessibility for all ages, all abilities. Our main diversity here is economic, as well as a rather large population of Indigenous peoples, offering devices, projects, et cetera, that meet the needs of our low-income patrons, as well as working with local tribal agencies to incorporate projects that teach about those groups' traditions. That's amazing. That is fantastic. Again, I think that goes back to this theme of understanding your user population and meeting them where they are, right? And it takes time to do that, to get to know your population, but we're not, you're not making assumptions. You're actually taking that time. That's amazing. We shared some information about our Facebook group and all of that. And so we have library makers, and then the so this recording will be available later. I think we had Rachel S. said we have adaptive equipment for people who have arthritis in their hands and can't use regular scissors. There's a link to the scissors and hand grippers. Kara's talking about making everything height adjustable. In general, I've just found that like flexibility is key in all things, furniture, like types of equipment available, like different spaces available for everyone. So, okay. And then there was a question about other ways to make things ADA accessible. And there are a few responses to that. So I recommend everybody take a look in chat. There's some great. Oh, and then Sarah doesn't have a mic, but she wanted to share that our community is very diverse regarding languages spoken and English literacy rates. So we write how-to guides at a 6th grade reading level to try and make them as accessible, I assume, as possible. And we're fortunate to have staff who can translate guides into Spanish, but internally we discuss the equitability about having staff as translators. So amazing stuff happening. I'm so excited to hear about all of this. Kara, do you want to share the next question? I think we kind of covered the first two already. So
Sure.
Maybe, yeah.
What are some indicators that you see that would indicate whether a space is equitable or not equitable, and how, do you measure those kinds of indicators in your space?
That's a big one.
It is. And I think, some of it is seeing, who's coming in and where are the challenges. I think that, as somebody else mentioned, if they're having trouble even getting in the door, that's a really good indicator that you need to look at some accessibility. So I think some of it, you can watch, where are people having issues? Are your things too high, too low? What's, difficult to access? Is everybody being equitably treated? Is everybody, do the women feel just as comfortable in your space as the men? Do different ethnic groups feel comfortable walking through your doors? I think that just some of the observations are important. But are there other things that you view as being, a way to gauge that, and how do you do that in your space?
I just want to point out in chat, Natasha mentioned that making sure your staff are diverse. I think that is one of the really key things. It can be difficult to find and recruit a diverse staff. We did something here at Miami. We have student workers that mostly run our space as far as the customer service in the space. And my manager of student workers had a concerted effort over the course of several years to make sure that all students were represented, or as many students as possible were represented on our student worker team. And so we did a lot of really targeted outreach when we were hiring. We reached out to student groups, like we have women in STEM, we have students, it's called Louise Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation in STEM, groups like that. We have a Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion, which is an amazing, welcoming space for students. We advertise there. And so I think that was easier for us just because we have the college campus and we have spaces that we can go. But I'd love to hear how other spaces have hired diverse staff as well, because that can be a hard one, but so important. I'll also just keep it open. Sorry, I hope I'm not talking too much.
Can I chime in? I'm sorry. I was trying to figure
Absolutely.
out the hand. I was trying to raise my
Oh,
hand.
you're good. You please chime in. Yes.
So when I was speaking on diversity, and I know it's hard to actually pinpoint and find the staff, but I was just saying, when adapting with staff, because I was very fortunate to hire or, work with staff who are, have physical disability, but just adapting to them and then realizing it's like, oh, this person has trouble walking, and trying to figure out how to accommodate them as well. So it's just like having empathy for staff and then realizing there's other people out there in the world and trying to adapt the makerspaces or labs to accommodate, all. So that's when I was chiming in, and I just had to sit back and think. It's like, oh yeah, we do have staff, who have physical disabilities, and there's another staff who's colorblind, but also works with Makerspaces and do digital media lab programs, and we're talking about Adobe programs, and so just showing other people that there's possibilities to be creative and to make sure we try to cater to all.
I think Rachel shared in the chat thread that they make sure that anybody can use the space, that your library finds, don't come into play with accessibility of the makerspace. And we do that as well. And I think that's so important.
Make it so inviting.
Yeah. And that materials are all sold at cost in their space, and Kat said the same with theirs. And that's the same with mine, that, we try to work to be able to sell those materials as inexpensively as possible. I try to source things in bulk and at low prices so that it is accessible to all. We also have community members that will come in and they love our space and they're like, here's an extra, you know, $5, $10, $20 to like pay it forward. And we kind of hold on to that. And then when we have people that are coming in the space saying, oh, I can't afford, even though your prices are inexpensive, maybe it's children or teens, you know, we don't have money. We use that pay it forward money and let them still do those things that they come in to do. So I think that there are so many ways to make cost not be a huge barrier. And I know for me, there are some, I'll say more affluent systems in our area that have higher end materials. And sometimes I'll have a couple patrons say like, well, why don't you carry this very high end wood? It's, you know, I try really hard to make all of my prices as affordable as possible for everybody. And so that we don't have these difference in price points of materials so that there is inequality in what people can afford in the space, that it's all very affordable. And, you know, you're welcome to bring in your own materials. But I think looking at that, you know, there is that difference of can I make it affordable and still have quality materials, but maybe not those super high-end things that do cause some inequality in pricing. And then we try to do some of those things with programming, that if I have programming money that we can do slightly, you know, higher end activities within that. And, you know, all of our programs are free, that's another way to kind of incorporate that in at no cost to people who want to come in and do those things, which is kind of a fun way to pull that in.
Yeah. I was just going to say, so again, I'm a student right now. I finished, and my priority is I'm also neurodivergent. I'm currently working at out of our Do It program here at WISC, which is our UW-Madison, which is our center for, I guess, like IT basically. But I work out of our college library, which is part of my job is in the college library design space. I do sessions with students who can come in or do one-to-ones or virtual one-to-ones and teach them how to use things like Adobe Illustrator. And we also do workshops and things like that. It's kind of like a halfway step between like a makerspace and a tutoring center. And just kind of hearing this conversation about like, how do we know if our space is equitable and, you know, staffing diverse, and how do we recruit diverse staff? I think this is something that we've definitely been addressing over the summer. And I'll be honest with you, I think it has a lot to do with our outreach. And it has a lot to do with like, people don't really know or think of libraries as a place to work. I think they think of it as a resource. They definitely think of it as a place to go. I think most college students think of this as like a place to study, but they don't really recall, or kind of like, it always seems to occur to them that like, oh yeah, you can work there. And they have such a, especially like the younger generation of like, you know, 20 somethings, they all have, you know, relatively, you know, not all, I will not generalize, but a majority of them especially have like a real depth of knowledge with technology as software specifically, like the Adobe suite, like, you know, programming languages, things that are relevant to, you know, makerspaces that have aspirations to teach their community those same skills, right? So I think it has a lot to do in terms of like diversity about how we go about outreach to our community, because if you build it, they will come kind of thing. But the pathways that we go about it are really important. I don't think that students that are younger are using Facebook, to be very honest. But they use Instagram, and they're around. So finding ways to like use resources to reach out to your community and say like, hey, we are hiring for the summer, and we want you to come in to use your community resources to build a platform for yourself towards your dream career, right? Connect with your community members, you know, be a part of, you know, your town, and I don't know, get to where you want to be is a really wonderful way, I think, to recruit meaningfully in your area for diverse population of students who want to move forward, and not just the ones who get brought in by their parents, but the students who bring themselves in. And I think it can be challenging, but from, you know, we're all discerning and intelligent individuals. I think that when you find it, you find it. And it's been refreshing this summer. We're also recruiting, hiring more diverse staff right now. Specifically, we've been looking for more women and like women who are in design trainers, like, right, that's specifically our demographic that we're hiring for. And so working over the summer, it's been like as a task for myself as like a trainer to like target this audience or this specific demographic and like, hey, you are a young woman who's learning or interested in design. We're hiring you. It's one of the safest places on campus to work. You're gonna be studying anyway. You're going to be, if not in college library setting, then next door at the Union Memorial. You pay for this resource anyway, it's part of tuition. So just come by. Don't go back to your dorm with an unfinished homework assignment. Come to us. And then, you know, sleep easier that night, you know, knowing that your homework is done. It's very much about that. And I think that like it's not easy, especially like I'm not here to say that it's easier or easy, sorry, but like I think that libraries, for me, especially like growing up, I've had a very wonderful relationship with my local libraries, and I love libraries. But I'm also a very bookish child, or was a very bookish child. So yeah, I don't know. Diversifying, I think, is also very much become a task now of normalizing the library as a comfortable third space for children and for their parents to recognize that this is a place where preteens and teens can go to hang out together. And not only like just to be, but also to just to socialize, and that's normal. And that's a way bigger
I think
load.
that's so true. Those are such good points. And I know for those of you in public libraries as well, I sometimes also have the challenge, you know, I don't have the students that I can easily, you know, try to approach like in an academic library as employees. And I find that I often struggle with people who see libraries as the traditional hiring roles. They want to do reference or circulation, and they don't necessarily see the makerspace as, you know, we're kind of a unique niche hiring spot. Do any of you have had any good solutions of, you know, where you're doing your outreach to pull maker staff instead of traditional library staff for those roles?
Actually, we had that particular problem years before when it came to hiring for we call them public services specialists, because I manage a teen department in a digital media lab, where we do, you know, makerspace activities as well. And we weren't getting the applicants. And actually, my location is like 10 minutes away from Virginia Commonwealth University. And that's where I also got my bachelor's from, painting and printmaking, a long time ago. So we've been pushing for admin to like, why are we not reaching out to these college students? Because I mean, this is a great opportunity for them to come and work in these spaces to get these skills, especially if they're in education or in the art field. And I'm like, why are we not reaching out to them? Because when I was in school, I would rather be in this particular position versus doing work study. And so we started reaching out to the universities and community colleges, and then we're getting more applicants who are interested in working in our departments. So it's like, I don't know, based on whichever library system, depends on how they approach reaching out to, to target the right candidates for certain positions. But we were very fortunate to convince admin, hey, let's reach out to, the universities and college because it makes sense. Especially then we started seeing more applicants once they graduated too. So, I mean, especially with our library system, because you can make pretty decent money without having a librarian degree too. So, and you can gain skills as well.
I think that's an equity point right there, is considering alternate skills instead of a degree for that position, which I think is amazing, because too many times, I mean, I believe that the MLS degree is important. I have one myself. Like, I know the importance of it, but for some positions that are more technical in a makerspace environment, you don't necessarily need the librarian degree. And a lot of times, like, certain libraries are so stuck on that notion, and it really excludes a lot of really qualified people who may not have had the chance to get that degree, may never thought of getting that degree, because they know all of this really advanced technology and they've had experience in that. So anyway, I think that's an equity point right there. It's just
Right.
yeah, like considering people who have
And
alternate degrees.
Right, and not always about circulation. And then when people come or hear about libraries, they think about books, shelving books all the time. And then you mention it's like all the other cool stuff. And it's like, really? The library has all of that? Yes, it's pretty
Exactly.
awesome. It's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But like getting back to just knowing your career route. Because I want to tell a little story. When I was working on my bachelor's, and I started off in art education, and I wasn't really interested in going to schools, but there was this librarian. She came in to one of my painting and printmaking classes, and she was talking about, you can still be an artist and be a librarian. And I was like, what? And so I decided to go that route of library science. And then years later, that person became my supervisor. So, but yes, just like getting there, like speaking when the person mentioned about outreach, is just spreading the word to the community is very important, because we're almost like a hidden gem, but there's so much possibility when it comes to libraries, public and academic too. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy the makerspace component and advanced technology of my job. That's like my favorite part. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting seeing, everybody else's career paths and how they came across working in libraries and, in certain positions. And I love, being around people who are, into maker spaces. So it just really excites me. So yeah.
Yeah. Students are surprised when they learn I'm a librarian.
Right.
They're
It's
like,
like, ooh,
you're a librarian.
yeah,
Or I
because
sometimes don't even mention it because it's like so irrelevant to, but I do like to mention it because I like to teach students that there are alternate careers in librarianship,
right,
and
librarians are
because I think it's an
cool.
awesome career. Yeah, it's an
Right.
awesome career to go into.
And
I
that's
think it's
another funny
also,
thing.
so I think it's also fun in public libraries when, people come in and they're trying to, I think, judge their own comfort level in the space. And they kind of ask, well, how did everybody end up working here? What are your backgrounds? And the fact that no two of us have the same story as to how we arrived in this job position, I think is another really nice kind of equalizer, because they realize none of us that work here are the same or have had the same path, and that it really is just this mix of people that all just like to make and help other people make. And I
Yeah.
think that the other thing I've learned when successfully trying to recruit people is to point out that while you may really enjoy making, if you don't enjoy helping other people make, this may not be the right career path, because so much of what we do really is helping other people learn to use the tools to make their things, that it's not about what we enjoy necessarily,
You have to.
and that it really is educational. And I think that that is a kind of was a huge learning point for me, that, learning to make is not enough. You have to really want to help other people learn to make. And that
Exactly.
I can teach tools, I can teach equipment. I can't teach you to want to teach other people.
And you have to be passionate about it too, wanting to
Absolutely.
work with people, because that's what I enjoy from my job, is giving back to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, which is exactly what a librarian does. So we are, traditional librarians in that way. So going back to the last question about any measured like indicators of equity, I know we want in about 3 minutes, we'd love to have a little survey at the end of this. So we have about 3 minutes more, but I would, if y'all have any surveys or other kind of like tools or indicators that you use in your space to measure equity, I have a survey that I give at the end of every semester, and part of that survey is on the equity of my space, and I'm going to do a cleaned up version of that and share it on the Library Makers social and also on the Nation of Makers Slack. I would invite you all to do the same, because I don't think we'll have time during the session for everybody to kind of like share their assessment tools, but I would love to see if you're willing to share what
Also,
tools you use.
Jennifer raised a good point as well in the chat. I didn't want to miss that. She asked about micro-credentialing, if anybody is using, tools to help or ways to do micro-credentialing to help unemployed or underemployed people actually be recognized for the skills that they gain in your makerspace. Is anybody aware of a good way to do that amongst makerspaces?
So
And if
I personally don't have any experience doing this, but I am aware of a person out in Buffalo doing this. His name is Sam, and I think I have his contact information. Let me just sift through some stuff here.
And if my email is in the chat, if you want to send that to me, we can make sure that Sarah and Lisa and I get that out through the same channels that will put out the other information. But I think that's an excellent point that, people learn a lot in our spaces, and it's hard to sometimes come up with good ways to reward that in meaningful and accessible ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Kat uses Niche Academy at their institution. So yeah, okay. So I know that Lisa has a short survey that she would like to make sure we get in at the end of the session. So I will hand it back over to.
I think it's Sam Abramovic from Buffalo, New York. Yeah,
Okay.
he works with it's a mixed population of sorry, I'm responding to the chat coming in. I apologize. He was also at Play Make Learn this year, Lisa.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you find that
Yeah,
his contact information and he's okay with you sharing it, if you could share it with one of us, we could post it.
absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Everyone. So this has been an awesome discussion. I hope it's been useful for everyone. We have our programs and events that we offer are available because we have a grant from IMLS that helps support this project. And so we just have a quick survey. We'd love to get some feedback from you. And we're also looking to always find out new topics that would be interesting for folks to have on these discussions. And so that's part of what the survey is asking you as well, is just what other topics would be interested to you. So I always like to end a little early so that you can have these last couple minutes to fill out the survey. So I just put the link in the chat. It's a new survey, so I hope it opens for everyone. We tweaked it a little bit for this year. So let me know if you have any issues, but in the meantime, I just want to thank Sarah and Kara too for being facilitators of this discussion today. We hope that you all will continue this conversation on the librarymakers.org platform or with Nation of Makers Library Working Group as well. I mean, I think it's a conversation. It's so important to keep woven into everything that we do and throughout the year. And we just really appreciate you being here. We will have the recording available as well for folks. And so you'll be able to access that afterwards as well. So thank you, everyone. Feel free to sign off after you finish the survey. And this is always that little awkward time where we just sort of stare at each other while we finish the survey. But, but I really appreciate you doing it and taking the time today.
You guys can say hi to my kitten while you
Oh
do
my
the survey.
goodness. Yay.
Say hi, Gus. Ficus.
That's great.
So
Guys.
cute.
Oh my gosh, it's a little kitten too.
Little baby.
Yeah, he's like 13 weeks, I think. Little baby.